Hi, I'm Katrina, and this is Boldly Challenging Ableism. I'm your host, Katrina Simon. I'm the Community Program Specialist at the Institute on Community Integration at the University of Minnesota. This program explores various topics that impact people with disabilities in our community. Each episode addresses a different aspect of our society within the context of ableism. Ableism is the prejudice that stems from the belief or belief system that assumes someone is less capable or less worthy because of a real or perceived difference in ability or function. On this program, we hope to answer some questions you may have been afraid to ask, or maybe some you didn't even know you had. Thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Boldly. Thanks for joining us this week. We're doing part 2 with Linda Wolford. She's going to tell us the true story of enhanced rate in Minnesota. Linda, if you didn't join us last week, Linda is the Government Relations Director at the Minnesota Council on Disability. Last season, on season 1, I don't know if you guys remember, or if you weren't here, that's fine too. I interviewed my boss, Amy Hewitt, and in that interview, I stated that SEIU, which is the union of some PCAs here in the state of Minnesota, not all PCAs, because they have to be doing something called the PCA Choice Program, which I can't get into what that is because that would take the whole half hour, but so only some PCAs. I stated that SEIU was responsible for something called enhanced rate here in the state of Minnesota, and they were not. So Linda's going to tell us the true story. Linda, how are you?
I'm good, Katrina. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for coming back. Can you briefly tell us what enhanced rate is first?
Sure.
Okay.
The enhanced rate, and this is only in the personal care assistance, changing into the CFSS program through the Department of Human Services, is the enhanced rate means for those individuals who receive, first it started out in statute as 12 hours a day, and I think it was 2 years later, it dropped to 10 hours a day. If they receive that amount of services per day, assessed by the assessment that they get done annually, to receive that much, you are eligible, your workers are eligible for an enhanced rate of pay. That pay has been 7.5% of the reimbursement rate of the PCA program, and it's January 1st scheduled to add another 5% on, so it'll be 12.5% of what people who don't receive 10 hours, so the regular rate. Now, I will say that to qualify for the enhanced rate, a PCA worker has to take some training that is offered through Direct Course, which is administered by Institute on Community Integration, where you work. And so people have to take some classes and online, and then to qualify for that. So it's not automatic, although that's something legislatively we're working on, is to just say if you work for somebody that has more hours, you would be eligible to receive that, because I'll tell the rest of the story. I'll just answer that question and we'll go on of how it happened. That isn't what it is that you can get paid a higher rate of pay because people that you're working for have a higher level of medical need.
Okay, so just because percentages can be confusing for humans,
yes.
I'm going to go ahead and say that right now, and it's going to go up on January 1st. So actually, by the time this comes out, it'll go up. But right now, as we're taping this episode, the floor wage a PCA choice wage worker can make is $20.25 per hour. So 7% of that would be like $1.50 more, roughly.
Yep, 7.5%. Yep.
So then because you or myself are a little bit more difficult to care for, our cares are more involved.
Yep.
Person working for us could make $21.75 instead of $20.25 per hour.
Yep, somewhere around there's a range. Some providers calculate differently, but roughly that, yeah, some 22. And also there's now the tiered rate of how many hours a PCA has put in as a PCA,
Yep.
whether that's a choice or a regular, can get also more money based on their experience. So that's why it can vary even more.
Okay, but we're going to talk about the story of how that came to be.
Okay. Yeah, it's pretty, actually, it's not as involved as we might think because it was a few. So for a while, this was at a time when this passed was, let me see, in 2017. I think it was 2017. What happened was we had been talking that those of us, like people with spinal cord injuries, spinal muscular atrophy, like I have, people with cerebral palsy with significant needs, like different, and people with high behavioral needs. We had a much more difficult time finding PCAs because we call that they cherry pick. They would go to people that had a little bit lower needs because the rate of pay was the same. Mm-hmm. So we tried to talk about how, since we were having such a difficult time recruiting staff, and we were the ones most at risk of going to an institution with a higher level of care. So when I say we, myself, I was at the University of Minnesota at the time, so I was not working at DHS. I was at the University of Minnesota because DHS came next. Then myself, Rick Cardenas, who's no longer with us, was a strong activist from Advocating Change Together, and Tim Benjamin.
Okay, I'm sorry. Rick Cardenas was on the committee, but he has since passed, so he's not with us now, but he was with us then.
Yes, this is how this all passed.
Just making sure.
Okay. Yes, and he wasn't a committee. It was a group of just community activists. Yep. There was no committee. Yep. It was just some of us who gathered together to say, let's do something about this. So it was really grassroots organizing at its best. So it was Tim Benjamin, who was the late editor of Access Press. He was the editor at the time. And like I said, Rick Cardenas, who was at Advocating Change Together. Jeff Bangsberg, who was part of the Home Care Association. And then I think at that time he was an advocate, a disability advocate. Yeah. And Ann Henry, who was at the Disability Law Center, and some other folks too that gave input. But we got together and said, how can we make this? What can we do to try to help this problem of us recruiting staff? And because we felt like, since usually people have greater needs and it's harder, like, for example, need transfers, right? Yep. You need help with going to the bathroom, sometimes catheter care, some with medical needs, bowel program, things like that, or behavioral issues where, people can be violent or need chewing. So people with the higher needs would get a higher rate of pay. At first, we were going to do that by using assessments, and then we changed because it was too difficult to calculate that, is what we were told. And so instead, we went for the hours that were assessed per day of need. And so it started when the legislation passed. It was 12-hour or more a day. Your assessed needs had to be to qualify for that enhanced rate of pay. And then I think it was 2 years later, in that would be 2 years ago, 2021. I'm bad with the dates. So anyway, it was up to 10 hours a day.
Yeah, I think
the reason they could do that. Sorry, what did you say? Sorry.
I think it was in 2022, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're probably right. And so that was to add in more people. But even with that, we're only talking about 2,500 people in the state of Minnesota of the, I think, near 50,000 on the PCA program actually are in that category. So it's not a significant number of people. So that's why also the legislators bought into it. We met with the governor's office. We met with a number of legislators. We got them to sponsor the bill to change this. And they actually loved the concept. I have to say, are both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, thought it was a very novel way of trying to help that significant workforce shortage that we were experiencing and workforce crisis. And one of the things, though, that they wanted along with it, because it was after a series of articles done by Chris Sears, yes, right, in the Minneapolis Tribune, of what the state was like of direct support professionals, PCAs, and that there was a lot of people unable to find staff, or they were getting untrained staff. People walked out on, people died. People died because of lack of PCAs.
So I know 3 people who died because of this.
I do too.
I think most people know more. I mean, not most people, but most people in our community of people that need higher levels of care know more people.
Yes, I do know.
I don't know if John's one of them or not. We haven't heard the details.
Yes. Yep. Okay. Then, anyway, so then what they wanted also was to make sure that there was some training involved. And so what they said, in order to pass the bill, they really wanted there to be also some training requirements in place. And so that's why when you talked about SEIU starting enhanced rate, they got involved because they developed the training process for self-directed work of people had self-directed services. So as you said, PCA choices is self-directed. And so that they could take these classes and they also offered a stipend, still do, for those completing the training. And they also offer the classes to sign up to pay for classes that are charged for. They will provide stipends they will pay for the classes for workers who are attempting to qualify for that enhanced rate.
Yeah. So also, to complicate things further, and this has nothing to do with SEIU or anything, we teach one of the classes at ICA.
Okay.
I'm teaching it on Wednesday, but I wish the people didn't have to take it.
Well, there's debate about that because there are people like, for example, parents of children, of adult children with disabilities have been taking care of them for 30 years, and and some of them are not very computer savvy, because it's not an easy thing to actually take the training.
Well, and they
used to complex.
Yeah, and they used to have to come out in person.
Yes.
And now it's terrible because it'd be like a snowstorm and you're trying to care for a child and you got to go to this course. But I think it's a good course. I just think it should be you shouldn't have to take it to get the money is what I think.
Yes.
But I really love teaching it. And if you're from SEIU and you're mad, sorry, we can talk about it later. But I just, I think that if they want to take the course, great. And if not, they shouldn't have to if they've been caring for their kid for 30 years. Because they're really the expert on how to care for their kids. Let me tell you.
And like I said, what's not there, and the classes are not offered in any language other than English. So when I was I moved on to DHS after that law was passed. I want to make that clear. I was not a DHS staff member when that law passed. I became one later and worked on the workforce shortage. And that's one of the things that we learned about was that, people that, have been taking care of their loved ones for years, or that they speak another language, which many PCAs do. So that just got changed last year, that there's an exception process. If you do not speak English, but you care for a client that is of your own community, you can get an exemption by applying and still get the enhanced rate. So
that's good, because just to be fair, and again, not to complicate things, we did try to get our class translated, and we couldn't even find a translator to do it.
Yeah. And it's very costly.
Into Hmong, Somali, and Spanish, and we almost got a Spanish, and then I don't think even that one worked. And
I heard that it was tried in Spanish.
Or Somali.
Yes.
So.
Yes, and that is an issue. So so that's why I think that hopefully we can move in the direction of the classes are there for helping people, but not necessarily a mandate to get that higher rate of pay. Or maybe they get a higher rate and then an even higher rate if they take the class.
And then, okay, for sure, though, even no matter how you feel, the classes should be easier to access.
That's right. I was just going to say what we learned was that going on this training platform can be very complex, and logging in, and you got to do 2 different logins to get into one, and then take screenshots. All these things are stuff that, the young people today, they don't have a problem with. But when you're 7, I know of a guy who said, my dad's 75, he's never going to be able to master this, taking these classes. So he's going to settle for never getting the enhanced rate for taking care of his adult son who's a quadriplegic. So so that's where I feel like some more things maybe need to be built in to allow for other people to qualify, or that it's not necessarily taking the training to qualify, because that wasn't the intent of the legislation. The intent for us was to compensate people for doing a higher level of care, because it is much harder for us to find staff, and also to prevent people from going into institutions when they can live at home.
Yeah. I also think, and I am a person with a disability, so I do see it from that standpoint, but I also feel like from a workload standpoint, people should be compensated for doing more work.
Absolutely.
Because I know, like, I am more work to care for than somebody who can walk and just needs standby assist.
Yes, and I also, the same way, I even require a breathing machine at night to breathe on. And so I have very high level cares. So yes, and all the people that were a part of this are people with the high level of needs that worked on that legislation to get it passed. We're all people in that category of high needs.
Yeah, and to be clear, you can be high needs and not be high physical needs. So, like, I know someone where they're the person that they care for, it's their son. Like you were saying, it's their son, and he's an adult, and he doesn't sleep, and so nobody in the house sleeps. So you are up, and somebody has to be up and awake with this person 24 hours a day. Now, he doesn't need lifting, but he does need someone to have eyes on him 24 hours a day.
Yes, very much so. And queuing or constantly being monitored for self-injurious behaviors, that kind of thing. So absolutely.
Yeah. So I feel like the point I really want to drive home right before I get to the next question is that this is an example of people with disabilities making positive change for other people with disabilities, and SEIU sort of took the credit.
Yeah, well, maybe they're involved now, but I didn't give them the credit. Maybe they do. But they were not part of passing that legislation.
Maybe they didn't take it, but somehow through whatever channels, it became like it was erased that the people with disabilities made this change.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if there's other stories like that.
I think that there's, I don't know that we've gotten where people take the credit, but I didn't talk about this in the last episode. I was one of the class representatives when Metro Mobility went completely crashed the system, and the National Guard came out, made national news, and driving Metro Mobility vans here in the Twin Cities to get people even just to medical appointments, dialysis appointments to work. That we were the first in the history of the United States to have people, and it was 3 of us who were riders that were class representatives class action suit. I guess that we successfully settled. It never went fully to court because a provider from Texas who had come in, or you can remember the name, ATE, and this was a long time ago, they decided to settle. And there were some parameters put in the system to stop the really long rides, the really long waits. But my understanding is I'm not riding Metro Mobility much anymore, but I have friends who do, and the system still is by far from perfect. So
okay, so I'm just sorry. Could I just back you up a little bit and ask you what the terms of the or what the premise of the case was?
Yes, the premise of the case was that people were, as a paratransit service, which is those that provide door-to-door service for people who cannot use the regular route service or during certain times like winter. And so they had to, so a new provider came in and took over the whole system. And the system crashed. They did not have accurate information. They couldn't find people. People were on the van, the buses they bought for hours. I remember one day, I think I was on the bus for 3.5 hours to get to work, which should have been a 15-minute ride. So it crashed. And so finally, the riders got together. We secured a law firm that was willing to file a pro bono suit, meaning that they only got paid if we won the suit, to file a class action suit against what was then the Regional Transit Board. Now it's Metro. Now it's and now it's the Metropolitan Council.
Metropolitan Council.
Yep. So, but back then that was the Regional Transit Board, and we filed a class action based on discrimination against people with disabilities.
And so it was, when you say they crashed this, was it okay? So before this new person came in and crashed the system, was it a good service?
I'd say it was one of the best in the country. Yes, and it had multiple providers. That was one of the reasons, is that if you didn't want, get good service from one provider, you could go to another provider. Cabs were in the system, so people who were ambulatory that could ride cabs would call cabs.
Yes,
those like myself who needed lift-equipped vehicles would call that company. And so we went from multiple numbers of providers in different areas to one giant provider to cover the whole metro area.
And you that shift did not go well. And would you say it would be better if we had multiple providers now today? I mean, we have two
providers now, east side, west side of metro.
Yeah.
I know that metro, we at MCD are looking at what we can do to get like Uber or Lyfts or some other places to have accessible options for people. So I think if we moved a little bit on that we wouldn't have to rely solely on paratransit buses taking like large numbers of people to different places and riding for long periods of time. So I think that, with a GPS is a great thing, because drivers used to get lost all the time. But I think also systems that can schedule better, automation, AI should be helping. Hopefully the problem now what I hear is that we don't have enough drivers to drive.
I've heard that. And then, but do you think we went from, because how we had many providers and now we have two? Do you think we went down in the number of providers just because of cost savings? Is that why?
Yes, they thought that they could make the system cheaper by having just a couple of providers versus multiple. Plus, it's easier, right, to do the billing and all that stuff. Yeah. But I know at first, and I have not been, like I said, in transportation for a while, like I was engaged in it. So what we learned was that when that big provider came in, actually the cost went up. They were transporting far fewer people per day at a higher cost, because they were doing it by hourly versus per passenger. So they also made that change. They used to reimburse providers on how far someone went. If you were in a wheelchair, you got a higher rate of pay, and it was by the individuals they transported. So there was incentive, right? The more people you transported, the more you got. Now it's just an hourly rate. So I know at first the numbers got way down with how many rides were provided. I don't know what those statistics are right now. I'm sorry, that's not my area of expertise.
That's okay, but it was a good example, though. Okay, we have about 1 minute and 30 seconds left, and I was wondering if you have anything else you'd like to tell our listeners about activism, especially in the state of Minnesota, but it's not limited to that. But
sure.
Okay.
I think that I want to say that we shouldn't take our rights for granted. That as we're seeing on the federal level, things coming down, people I think might have gotten a little bit comfortable in thinking that things are going to stay this way, and we fought hard. But we need to keep fighting, and we need to stay engaged and not expect others to do it. If we are on services, we should be prepared to fight for those services and not expect others to. When people say, oh, somebody else can write that letter. No, you need to contact your legislators. I want to stress that. Contact your legislators and talk to them. Personal stories work best with legislators, telling your story, how it impacts you. That's what gets them to move. And that's what we did. That's how we got, coming full circle, that's how we got the enhanced rate, was us telling our stories to legislators and getting them to buy into wanting to make that change. So activism does work. It can work. It still works. And I would just really encourage people out there to stay engaged in your legislature with, or getting, get on a board of a nonprofit, just getting engaged in whatever way. If it's writing that letter, if you can't go, a lot of meetings now are virtual with places, even that you can testify at the Capitol virtually. So there's no excuse. You need to become active if you want to stay with the services we have or keep them or get new services and funding. You have to have your voice heard.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Linda. It's been a delight.
Thank you so much, Katrina. It's been great to be on your show.
I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll let you know as soon as it comes out.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Boldly Challenging Ableism is a co-production of AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and the Institute on Community Integration at the University of Minnesota. For more information, please visit ici.umn.edu.